Good morning and welcome to Breakfast with Boyden. I'm Wendy Wilsker, Managing Partner of Boyden Boston. Today, I am so excited for our very special guest, Rachelle Sanders, Chief Development Officer at Breast Cancer Research Foundation. Good morning, Rachelle. Welcome to Breakfast with Boyden.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, as some of our viewers know, Rachelle is one of my oldest and dearest friends in the world. And our careers and our lives have really paralleled each other. And so we talk almost daily, and invariably our conversations move from family and dogs and life and aches and pains as we age to our work. Recently, we had a conversation about our career journeys and how we both have moved sectors and really kind of gone through different sectors of the nonprofit world. Rachelle, you started your career in publishing and public relations and then moved to fundraising throughout different sectors of nonprofit, secondary education, academic, medicine, healthcare, and now a foundation. Let's go back in time, 25-ish years ago.
Thank you.
You were working in publishing and PR, and then made that shift to media relations at Trinity College. Talk about that transition from, for-profit to nonprofit.
Okay. So it's interesting. I was thinking about this, in preparing for our conversation, and I had, so I was at this PR agency. I left publishing and moved to a PR agency. That was a natural progression. And I had a client, I was very junior on the staff. So any clients they gave me, I was grateful. I would take anything, any work. And one of the clients was a small tech company in Providence, Rhode Island. And I went to see these gentlemen. They were so passionate and excited to share about their company. And they talked about technology transfer. I'd never heard that phrase. And so their entire company was based on NASA technology that had been released about how you treat water without chemicals. And they were applying it to backyard swimming pools, which was at the time very revolutionary. But I was just fascinated by this idea of the transfer of technology. And so they were very generous with their time with me. And I remember saying to Guy, I said, I wonder what kind of transfer I could do. And he said, what are you good at? And, I thought about it. I said, well, I'm a good writer and I'm pretty strategic. And I've been told I have a very high EQ. And he said, I'm a scientist. I don't know what you can do with that, but I'm sure there's a lot you could do with that. And the whole drive back to Boston, I remember thinking, well, what am I interested in? And so that was kind of the inspiration of this idea that you don't have to just do one thing. And then if I may, you asked about going to Trinity. When I went, I didn't even know about nonprofits. I was very naive. At the time, my husband had taken a job in Hartford. We were leaving my only apartment ever with central air conditioning. I was very upset. And I was interviewing at agencies, PR agencies, and I had this thought I didn't want to do it. The work in the client field didn't resonate with me. And I found a job at Trinity. I went there and the whole thing came together, right? There was mission, there was tradition, it was education. I would be surrounded by some of the smartest professors at Trinity College in Hartford. I mean, this opportunity, I was able to shift my skills. They were interested in my skills because I'd worked with very challenging clients and authors. And that was my introduction. So it really was, you talk about falling into things. I really didn't know about nonprofit work.
So great. That's so great. And so, there you were working in communications and, oftentimes our career changes go with moves. And I remember you moved to Boston and up to New Hampshire, and your move from Trinity College to Cushing Academy was really natural. And you were working in communications. And I remember our conversations. You would be interviewing donors and, hearing their stories and sharing their stories in your magazine. And, I think at some point you realized that your work as a storyteller could also be telling stories and raising money. And at that time, I was a frontline fundraiser. And I remember you asking a lot of questions like, about fundraising and could you do this work? And you are a natural relationship builder. But I think that many people find themselves stuck in a box of I'm in communications or I'm in advancement services. And so talk about that gradual progression from writing about donors to engaging with donors and raising money.
Absolutely. No, it's a great point. I was thinking about this. It's natural. It's our human nature to want to segment things, right? We say divide and conquer. We say stay in your lane, which, I've never been very good at. But, sometimes I think about my natural curiosity. I want to see things as a whole. How does everything function together? What's working? What's challenged? And when I think about organizations or even organisms, or like, what are all the different parts that make it function as one? So at Cushing, right now, Cushing was a new world to me. We went to public high school. This was a boarding school. It was a phenomenal community, an incredible school. I was so proud to be there. And I was doing marketing communications. I was responsible for a very high level of messaging and revenue. But, I kept hearing conversations about fundraising and the need for philanthropy, but that was outside of my duties. And I'd hear conversations about challenges with hiring faculty or things with facilities. Again, not my job. And that said, I remember being on the road. And so for the marketing piece, I was recruiting. I was with, some of the wealthiest families in the world, recruiting students. And I was having a conversation with an incredible woman in Seoul, Korea at the Grand Hyatt. And she was just talking about how the dorms, she was very disappointed with the dorms. We had this conversation. Long story short, I started having a gift conversation. I didn't even know I was really having a gift conversation. It dawned on me because there was a translator sitting between us thinking, this is a gift conversation. You really need to get, more educated. But it worked. And she ended up supporting us. And when I went back, my boss at the time, the late Joseph R. Curry, Dr. Curry, was one of the most incredible headmasters, I think, in the history of American boarding schools. And he looked at me and he said, we're going to change your duties. And he sent me to a case conference. And he just said, this is, because I was asking a lot of questions about, well, how does a school function, right? If we don't get enough revenue from just tuition, how do we keep this beautiful campus going? How do we keep this tradition going? And philanthropy was critical. So that was my first step.
It goes back to what those scientists told you, lean into your strengths. And, I think that all of our lives, people have said, oh, you're an extrovert, you're a people person, right? And sometimes you wonder, like, what do you do with that? And you are someone, Rachelle, who is a naturally curious person, right? I mean, if anyone sits next to you on an airplane, like, forget about it. You're not reading a page of your book, right? You just really love engaging with people. So you raise millions of dollars at Cushing Academy. I mean, your impact will be so long lasting and traveled the world meeting with incredible donors. And, when your family moved down to Little Rock, Arkansas, there was not really the quantity of nonprofit organizations. And I remember you were interviewing at the Cancer Center at University of Arkansas Medical School. You had never worked in higher education and you had never worked in academic medicine. And sometimes I think there again is that box and that those segments thinking, well, if you haven't worked in higher education, we don't really know if you can, or if you haven't worked in healthcare. So how did you make the case that you could take all of the skills that you had gained and bring that to academic medicine?
It's a really great question. And actually, I didn't make the case. I had the blessing, right? Because I talked to everyone, right? I sent some letters when I knew I was moving to Arkansas, which I highly recommend everyone go visit. It's a phenomenal place. And it was a lovely place to raise children. I sent letters to universities, mostly universities, because I thought, okay, there wasn't the number of boarding schools. I'll stay in education. And I spoke to the man who was then the head of advancement at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and Dave. And he gave me this opportunity. He said, okay, great, you come work for me. And I said, Dave, you've been talking to me for 10 minutes. I'm sitting here in Ashburnham, Massachusetts. You've never even met me. And he said, and this was before Zoom. And he said, now you need to come work here. I said, well, I'm moving to Little Rock. I'm looking at a map. Fayetteville seems to be quite a distance. And he said, fine, you'll go to the Cancer Center. They need someone. I said, I've never worked in academic medicine. He said, you are a fundraiser. He said, we need you. He said, we need you more than then you need us, which really shocked me. And so that was kind of the open door. He gave that to me. He gave me the opportunity to prove myself, because it wasn't just a gimme. I did have to show that I had the skills. But I was thinking one about, I love quotes, right? And Edward Gorey is one of my favorite illustrator authors, really phenomenal. And I wrote about this on a LinkedIn post. And the quote is, be open to everything. Never close your mind, because you never know where your next idea may come from. And I think about moving across sectors, about staying curious, about taking chances, and actually listening to yourself. And I just want to say there are a lot of voices out there. There's a lot of content, right? If we're on LinkedIn, as an example, there are people telling you, do this, don't do that, wear this, don't wear that, say this, never say that. There's so much out there, and you really have to go back to your inner voice and what you want to do, what you think you're capable of, because I just want to share, my whole life, right? There were things I wanted to do. No one thought I should go to Arkansas. Not one of my friends, not one of my family members, not you, right? People said, you're crazy. And my whole life, when we went to summer camp, my friends said, you can't go to summer camp. You're going to miss the pool. And then when I was in high school, when I went to study in Paris, people said, you can't go to France for so long. You're going to miss the dance or the games or whatever. And when I was in university, I took a job waitressing a lot in Fenway Park. And they said, you can't do that. You're going to miss all the parties. I know myself. I can do it. I went to live in Sweden. Everyone said, you're going to waste your education. You're going to fall behind in your career if you go live in Sweden when you graduate. It was the best thing I ever did, right? It was the most incredible experience. So there is a piece of taking in the advice, but then also listening to what are you interested in? I mean, that's what I tell people. Think about, what do you want? Whoever asks you what you want. I ask myself all the time. So I think that combination helped me because I was open to it.
Right. And I think when you're asking yourselves the questions, what do you want? What do you enjoy? What are you good at? It's different than what do you want your title to be, or, where do you want to work? Yeah. On the flip side, though, as hiring managers, and I know that you were asked this question, when you were at Montefiore, you built your team, you hired a lot of people. And I remember that you had said to me that someone in HR said, okay, how many years of healthcare fundraising do you want this major gift officer to have? So now let's flip the conversation to hiring managers who may have a different idea, or who may have a fear, of someone being able to go from, an arts and cultural organization into higher ed or academic medicine. What's your advice for hiring managers?
Again, I think it comes back to being open. There's an adaptability. Really, what are the skills that you want someone to have? When I hire people, I welcome different experiences and points of view, because I actually also want to learn. I don't care about levels. I want to learn from other people as well. I welcome their critical thinking and their good judgment and their grit and their work ethic and kindness and commitment. Those are the skills I'm really looking for. The sector they've been in is less important to me. And what I would say is, even at BCRF, there is someone I work with who worked in a very corporate world. Her experience is invaluable to us. And so I just feel like, as a hiring manager, what is driving your need to hire someone? I don't want to say cookie cutter, but they have to have this. What is the have to, as opposed to want to? Because I think there's an opportunity that we're missing. And in my coaching, I've been studying, different models in neuroscience, and there's one of the models, and it's called SEEDS, and there's a similarity bias, right? And we won't go down that path, but we are comfortable with people who are like us. And so I think there's a comfort zone too, of someone who, has worked in another medical center. They know exactly what I'm going through, but maybe they come from a different sector and they bring a great idea, and then we really thrive. So I just think, look, it's not that someone with similar experience is not valuable. Of course, that could be valuable. I just think we need to be a little more open to different experiences.
And, it's interesting too. I remember when I was building my team at Jewish Family and Children's Service, we really had to grow our major gift program. At the same time, there was an urgency around our annual fundraising. And I had hired someone who had worked at a very long established academic medical center. They had raised lots of seven-figure gifts. And I was really drawn to this person because we had to elevate philanthropy.
Right.
What I found, the mistake that I made, was that I didn't think about our pace. I didn't think how fast we needed to be moving, that I needed gift officers to get out and thank people and share their stories and solicit their annual gift and cultivate their next gift and next gift and next gift. And this fundraiser was used to a pace where their organization was not dependent on annual gifts. And so that for me was such a lesson about, while I was so drawn to someone who had been in a different sector, I didn't think about the difference in urgency of philanthropic support and pace. And so, how do you think about that as well? When you're thinking about, yes, different sectors, but there's some things that someone can learn and other things that people need to bring, right? You talk about grit and tenacity. I always think like you can't teach someone hustle. So what are some of those things that you've learned also that, maybe kind of elevates your thinking about questions that you need to ask yourself as a hiring manager and then be probing with some candidates?
Okay. It's a multi-layered question. I think at the core of it, what I think about is when I have a team, right? And when things are going well, things are going well. And when there's a crisis, right? Who do you want in a crisis? Right? Because what I often think is, it's all well and good when you're sailing along and then something happens, even the pandemic, right? When the pandemic hit, right, at Montefiore, we decided within 24 hours to start fundraising. And people were really upset with us, right? But we had to shift, right? We had to shift immediately and everyone became a fundraiser. Who has the ability to do that? Does everyone on your team have the ability to do something a little different? Can you put some, I always think, okay, if I can't be there, can I put this person with the board? If I can't be there, can I send this person to Aspen to do this Goldman Sachs, video conference, right? Who can I deploy? Mm-hmm. And I look at people about deployability because there is a presence, there is a confidence, and there is an ability to learn on the job. Look, I've learned on every job. I've literally never done anything I've done until I've done, right? When I worked in publishing, I booked one of the authors on all the wrong TV stations because he was a CBS guy. No one told me. I booked him on NBC. Oh, I learned quickly, right? I never did that again. And then I taught other people coming down the pike. So who has the ability to learn, right? And what kind of questions can you ask them? I often ask people about crisis situations. Tell me about the most dire situation you've ever been in at work and how have you handled it, right? Because in truth, you really don't know until you're in it.
Right. So I think that, our themes are about, knowing yourself, right? Knowing your strengths, about being really open, and also about being flexible, and that flexibility doesn't end when you find yourself in a new job or a new sector, but even within your organization, you talked about like not staying in your lane. And I think that, there have been many lessons that we've all learned over the past, 2 years. And I think that's one of them, that the lanes are now invisible and we need to be able to shift in terms of roles and responsibilities and in different ways that we are supporting our colleagues and each other. We could talk for hours, as many of our phone conversations go, but we promise our viewers only 20 minutes, and I can't believe that our time has flown so much. So it is a tradition at Breakfast with Boyden that we ask our guests to share a memorable cup of coffee. And while you and I have traveled to many places together, I know that you have shared a cup of coffee with people much more interesting than me.
Well, I have my Boyden mug, so I will share my cup of coffee. Actually, my experience was a recent one, and I will so now I'm at the Breast Cancer Research Foundation, and I was meeting with a donor who happens to live in the same town as me. And it was so nice because it was safe at the moment to do so with COVID. And we met in town. We had a lot in common. She's a breast cancer survivor, 2-time breast cancer survivor, mother, daughter, wife, sister, friend, just an incredible woman. And I'm sitting there with her. I could have passed her 100 times in town. And she was so positive, and she was so determined to help find the cure for breast cancer. It really moved me because, at BCRF, we say research is the reason. She said, I'm here because of science. And with all of everything happening with COVID and, now more than ever, we need science to be part of an organization that's working so hard to find the cure for breast cancer, and to be sitting with this beautiful, lovely person who I could have been friends with just outside of work. It just was so meaningful. And I felt the impact of my work just sitting there at the coffee shop in town.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing a cup of coffee with us. And I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Sounds good. Take care.